Hey Bears, Eric here, and this wasn't the video I was going to make today, but I saw this article pop up as I was scrolling through social media, and I was like, I want to talk about this. This seems incredibly important because there's a lot of information in this article. And so I'm running with this today, and I think this is going to be an interesting discussion. It sort of touches on a lot of things that we've talked about on my channel as well as other podcasts. It touches on subjects that I haven't had full answers for, and I think we get some interesting answers, perspectives in this particular article. So we're going to run through this together. This is from Variety, and I believe it came out today. I think it came out earlier today by Adam Very, and let's just jump into this. I'm going to read through the article. I think it's important to go through the whole thing. I usually don't do this, but I think it's very important for this article to go through the whole thing, and then I'm going to interject and give my points as we read through here. So buckle up. The article reads, Toxic Fandom, How Hollywood is Battling Fans who are just out for blood, from social media boot camps to super fan focus groups. I think it's funny they use the term fans. I would use anti-fans. Bully tube, grip tube, scam tube, all of those places. Fans is kind of a word that I don't really associate with these guys anymore. I think you're being very generous, Adam. Most of the people who are still engaging in this content, and what I mean by that, the content they're making for YouTube and social media, are not watching the stuff that they're talking about. They're not really, tuning in every week. They're not going to the movies. I've caught many of them. We've talked about Melanie Mack, who has discussed X-Men 97. She wasn't watching that. Star Wars Acolyte. She wasn't watching that. We've had other content creators through the years come out and talk about how they're just not, like Eric July is not reading or watching any Marvel content anymore. So there's a lot of people that are still making this content that are not fans. They're not engaging anymore. Okay, so on August 28th, Amanda Stenberg, the lead of Star Wars series The Acolyte, posted an 8.5-minute video. We covered this video on my channel. The video's still up if you want to go check it out. To her Instagram stories about Lucasfilm abrupt decision not to pick up the show for a second season, just a month after the season 1 finale streamed on Disney+. Yeah, it was really weird. She goes, it was not a huge shock for me since the series was announced in 2020. She continued, we started experiencing a rampage of, I would say, hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudice, hatred, and hateful language towards us. And says that she was unavailable for comment on this story. It's probably because she just knows engaging in this, I'm going to be quite honest, no matter what she says here, she's going to get attacked for it. So it doesn't really matter. I think in her video, she covers everything that she feels about this. And if they're not going to pick up the show, she's probably just like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. I get it. I totally understand. So for me, if she never wants to speak on this again, it wouldn't be a big shock to me. To be honest. But I think a lot of people jumped on this idea that the comments of like hyper-conservative bigotry and vitriol, prejudice, hatred, and hateful language, they weren't really pushing back against that actually happening. They were just saying that she was pretending to be a victim. She was playing a victim here. So it's not like they're attacking or calling out any of the stuff. Look, you can not like the show. You don't even have to like her, but I don't think you have to condone the kind of stuff that was being said about her. And to be quite honest, it's under anything that she posts, anything she says, if comments are available, you're going to find like negative, hateful comments that veer into racism. And it's out there. Just go look at her Instagram. In other words, the Acolyte was the latest high-profile target of toxic fandom, or I would call anti-fans or bullies. I know some people aren't too happy about like the different terms and phrases that we use for these folks, but I call it as I see it. The catch-all term for when a fan criticism curdles from good faith dissatisfaction into a relentless, negative, often bigoted online campaign against either the project or its stars or creative leaders. In a franchise economy increasingly dependent upon established audience devotion to drive the bottom line, the threat of toxic fandoms poisoning the enthusiasm has become a seemingly intractable headache for almost every studio, and it's only getting worse. I would say the issue with it getting worse is I'm not victim blaming here, but I think the studios have had a hard time on navigating how to handle this. And it talks about it more in this article, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. But I think the studios have done what a lot of people did, which was sort of ignored it, thinking it was going to go away, and that's not actually what happened. Because there is an ecosystem here on YouTube, and I actually blame YouTube a lot for this. I think YouTube has not done enough to mitigate this. They've allowed it to fester. They've allowed it to grow. And you would say, well, Eric, that's cancel culture. It's in their terms of service. If you have an issue with them with their terms of service, you can take it up with them. But the fact is, they do not enforce their terms of service. I've seen people on social media calling them out, actually sending them videos saying this is literally against your word for word, your terms of service, and they just don't do anything. And who knows what the reason is? I'm not saying YouTube is necessarily siding with like this kind of stuff, but they're certainly not doing anything to mitigate any of the damage that's being done. And that's unfortunate, because I think this platform could be better served with actual enforcement of their terms of service. It comes with the territory, but it's gotten incredibly loud in the last couple years, said a veteran marketing executive at a major studio. People are just out for blood regardless. They think the purity of the first version will never be replaced. Or you've done something to upset the canon of the beloved franchise, and they're going to take you down for doing so. Yeah, it's kind of an outrage ownership thing with the fandom. This is why I think it's hard to walk the line with a lot of this, is because you have people that love all the OG stuff, and they're never going to be on board with a reboot or a remake or an alternate version of the stuff they loved, because for them, that's just not an option. It's not an option. And trying to please those people while also trying to reinvigorate or reinvent or remake something older, it's almost never going to happen. And this is why I was saying earlier, like, the studios don't really know how to navigate this. And it's probably because you have this like butting of heads behind the scenes, where you have executives and board of directors are like, just remake Ghostbusters, just remake Transformers, just remake XYZ. And they don't understand the fandoms. And so they don't care or have a way of dealing with some of this, like, this minor pushback from a smaller portion of the viewing audience. And so it's just more of like an ignore it, it'll go away kind of thing. And again, I don't think that's the solution. Let's continue. Sometimes toxic fandoms behave reactively. A House of the Dragon episode featuring 2 female characters kissing, and an episode of The Last of Us focusing on a gay couple were both review bombed 100%. The practice of mobbing sites like Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb with negative user reviews, which gained mainstream attention following the premiere of 2017 Star Wars The Last Jedi. An entire YouTube ecosystem is devoted to declaring projects like The Marvels and The Boys woke garbage. Yeah, I mean, that's really it. It's really that simple. And this is, again, YouTube's fault. YouTube has allowed this to happen against their terms of service. The videos aren't just them commenting on the quality of the media. They're going after actors. They're going after directors. They're astroturfing content months, sometimes years before it comes out. They're picking up tiny bits of articles, little things, little statements, little quotes, and making entire hate campaigns about something that doesn't matter. A good example, and I'm going to put it up on screen now, are things like this from Star Wars Theory, right? So you have this thumbnail with WTF, him looking at Daisy Ridley with a red down arrow behind her head, which, what does that mean here? What does that mean? You can't change how some men see women. So in the speech bubble, that quote makes sense to me. You can't. There's some portion of the male population that just are not going to see women differently. They've established how they feel about women, and that's how they're going to look at them. And so this is where it becomes a problem. Daisy Ridley loses it. She didn't lose it. So that's completely inaccurate. Says men are the problem. Noticing that he's leaving out the term some men. Like, it's just men. It doesn't say some men, it just says men. That changes the entire statement. Because now you've gone from her talking about a portion of a group and making it seem like she's talking about the entire group. He's not very good at this grift thing. Like Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker, they're very good at wordplay, and they kind of go around that. But Star Wars Theory is relatively new to the Chud space. He's new to this bullying, money grift thing. And so he doesn't always get it. It doesn't matter. His fans are going to watch this shit anyway, the ones that are still supporting him. But this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm saying. Like, this isn't talking about the movies or the TV shows. It is a campaign against an actress who doesn't want anything to do with this toxic shit. She clearly doesn't want to be involved in it. She's not on social media replying to people. She's not on Instagram making posts about people. Even then, it's not enough, in my opinion, to make a hate campaign against an actor. But the thing is, they're going after her without her really engaging with them at all. She's responding to questions. She's responding to things that are asked of her. She doesn't care about Star Wars theory as a person, but he cares very deeply about smearing her, just like so many other people in this space. Let's continue with the article. Just as frequently, the backlash begins before the project has seen the light of day. Absolutely. A Reddit mega thread dedicated to outrage over Bridgerton casting a black woman as the love interest for I don't watch the show. Francesca? Not sure. Social media epithets directed at the actors of color cast as elves and dwarves in The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, death threats aimed at Leslie Jones during the press tour for 2016's Ghostbusters. That's kind of when I remember, like we've talked about it on the podcast, that's when I kind of remember seeing all of this sort of start, was the Ghostbusters thing. There's a lot of issues with that 2016 Ghostbusters movie. I don't think women being part of that movie was the problem. There were issues with that movie that, regardless of who would have been in those roles, it wouldn't have worked. And that's just my opinion, but a lot of people I think would agree with me there. Perhaps the greatest irony of the phenomena is the disproportionate impact these toxic fandoms have relative to their actual number. Thank you for calling that out here. The vast majority of any fandom are casual fans, says John Van Kitters, interesting. VP of Star Trek brand development, who has been with the storied franchise since the 1990s. The number of people who live and die on their franchises are very, very few. And then those who come after things that they espouse to love with venom are a really, really tiny subset of an already smaller subset of the fandom. It's just much easier to see it now. I don't know that it's really that much broader than things were in 1995. It's just that the bullhorn wasn't there. I've said this so many times. I'm so glad he gets this. The difference between now and then is the way the internet works. Social media. Now, yes, we had things like bulletin boards and messaging and stuff like that back then, but we didn't have anything even remotely close to the impact that YouTube has, the impact that Twitter has, that Reddit has, that all these places have. There was nothing like that comparable to that era. But you can go back, and we've looked at it before, like write-ins to comic books and things like that, where people were still saying this stuff. They just didn't have a platform where they could be hateful and negative and direct it so specifically at someone. Like, it just didn't exist that way. But now any person can pick up their phone. They can get on TikTok, they can get on Instagram, they can get on YouTube, and they can start recording stuff and tagging actors and writers and stuff directly in their content, going after them for jobs that they've taken. And that's really the big difference. For some, combating the bullhorn amounts to acting as if they can't hear it, particularly when it's negative, toxic conversation. We don't even engage, as a TV marketing executive. Like with toxic people, you try and not give it too much oxygen. One principal concern is that reacting to these kinds of attack risk alienating fans who are unhappy with creative choices about a franchise, but haven't tipped over into the abusive behavior. So a studio may attempt to amplify friendlier voices instead, will reply to comments that are positive and to elevate those things. I've got something to say about this here. Still, toxic fandoms have grown so pernicious that they've become a fact of life for many, and so powerful that while talent, executives, and publicists will privately bemoan the issue, fear of inadvertently triggering another backlash kept several studios from speaking for this story, even in the background. As one rep put it, it's a lose-lose. It's a catch-22. It's a situation where if you ignore it, it doesn't go away. And if you engage with it, they'll spin it, and then you will look like the bad guy. Because they'll do something like Star Wars, for example, right? So we had all of that racist, misogynistic stuff going on, sexist stuff going on a couple years back. And when they came out and called out the behavior, these groups started saying that, look, Star Wars, these actors, they're attacking us, the fans. They are calling us racist. They're calling us sexist. They're calling us misogynistic. So it's a situation where, unless you know exactly how to navigate this space, which is what I was talking about earlier, unless you know exactly how to navigate the space, you are jumping into it where they are going to spin the narrative in their favor most of the times, no matter what. So it is a catch-22. You can't ignore it, but then when you engage it, you have to be very specific about how you engage it. And even when you do that, like you call out the racist behavior, which is actually happening, they're going to say, well, you're calling all the fans racist. And then the media illiterate community that follows these guys are just going to listen to what they have to say. That's the unfortunate reality. Those who did talk with Variety all agreed that the best defense is to avoid provoking fandoms in the first place. I don't think that's going to matter. I think they are perceiving these communities as rational individuals, and most of them are not. Most of them are not rational, and most of them are doing it for money, which means that this kind of, like, This approach isn't going to work either. In addition to standard focus group testing, studios will assemble a specialized cluster of superfans to assess possible marketing materials for a major franchise project. I do not like art by committee. This feels like censorship. Don't like that. They're very vocal, says the studio exec. They will just tell us, if you do that, fans are going to retaliate. These groups have even led studios to alter the projects. If it's early enough and the movie isn't finished yet, we can kind of make those kinds of changes. So in other words, you're taking all of the unique elements that may be a vision of the person making the film, and you're saying, we're not going to do that because we are so worried about like 5% of the fandom being loud and hateful. All right. Several studio insiders say that they often put their talent through a social media boot camp. In some cases, when a character is intentionally challenging a franchise's status quo, studios will, with the actor's permission, take over their social media accounts entirely. When things get really bad, especially involving threats of violence, security firms will scrub talent information from the internet to protect them from doxing. That's awful. Like, even if you don't like this stuff, like, again, I'm not the police of like what you like and what you don't like. I've said that for years. But even if you don't like this stuff, you shouldn't be going on social media and making it so these people can't even run their own social media. That's ridiculous. In some particular egregious cases, a direct response has been necessary. In 2022, the Obi-Wan Kenobi actor Moses Ingram denounced that hundreds of racist messages sent to her about their role. There's nothing anybody can do about this. There's nothing anybody can do to stop the hate. She said Lucasfilm posted a statement to its star, we talked about this a second ago, that read, there are more than 20 million sentient species in the Star Wars galaxy. Don't choose to be racist. That's not calling all fans racist. It's not even calling anybody specific racist. It's saying, don't be. That's what it's saying. But then that got spun by the machine that is the anti-fandom, the bully community, and they turned it into a rally cry for them. The Star Wars accounts also shared a video of Obi-Wan star Ewan McGregor saying the abuse made him sick to my stomach, and if you're sending her bullying message, you're no Star Wars fan in my mind. That is the correct way to respond to that, but again, they're just... Ewan McGregor's bullying fans. That's what they're going to say. Later that year, the cast of Rings of Power condemned the relentless racism, threats, harassment, abuse of some of our castmates of color are being subjected to on a daily basis. An actress from Lord of the Rings film trilogy posted photos of themselves wearing clothing featuring the ears of Middle-earth creatures in multiple skin tones under the message, "You are all welcome here," written in Elvish. Those efforts may have had an effect. In an August interview with Amazon MGM Studios, TV executive Vernon Sanders about Rings of Power, the executive said the show hadn't experienced the same racist hostility in advance of season 2 that greeted them in its 2022 debut. Okay, so they probably don't realize this, okay? But Rings of Power was being pitted against House of the Dragon, and so that was why it was so bad then and why it's different now. And I know that's such a small thing, but that kind of nuance matters. So I don't know if that had the effect they think it had, or it's just the fact that the shows were not pitted against each other the past seasons. People have had a chance to actually engage with the show. Overwhelmingly, we've seen that folks who came in with an open mind can discuss and debate their favorite things, which takes you out of the place of an ugly conversation that happened with some folks who may have been infused with an agenda that's separate from the show itself. They don't care about that. They don't care about that. I'm sorry, they don't. The people that say all this stuff don't care about stuff like that. There is one other way to handle toxic fandom on the internet. Stay off it. I'm not online, so I'm protected, says frequent Marvel star Elizabeth Olsen. Generally, it's a lot of positive experiences of making kids happy. I ignore the other stuff. And I think if you are someone involved in these projects, like an actor, a writer, whatever, ignoring it could probably be in your best interest. But I think overall, like studios and executives and people at the top who are making decisions, ignoring it is not going to make it go away. Thinking that because you posted something that says everyone is welcome here, that changed their mind. That's just this utopian idea that just doesn't exist in this space. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer about it, but that's just the reality of it. The issue is that the sites that have terms of service that say you're not supposed to be racist, you're not supposed to be homophobic, you're not supposed to be misogynistic and sexist, these are in their terms of service. When these kinds of violations happen, these sites need to enforce their terms of service. We would see a lot less of this if the bigger platforms that amplify these voices actually cared about their terms of service. But as it stands, we're still watching this stuff spread like wildfire on YouTube, and YouTube has done nothing about it. I would love if it got to a point where we didn't have to make these videos pushing back against this stuff because YouTube did their job.